So, welcome to another edition of Notes from Erin. I'm so excited to have a guest here today. We have author Anne Marie. If you could give readers or listeners an intro about yourself.
Anne Marie Wells. I'm mostly a poet, but I have also written a number of plays that were either published or produced, a couple of children's books, and most recently, my travel memoir is forthcoming this June with Starbelt Press. It's a exploration of happiness and adventuring through Iceland when I was a younger, more adventurous person, 10 years ago when I was turning 30.
Okay, perfect. So, I guess I'll start with a question about your reading life and then we'll go back to Happy Iceland, which I'm really excited to talk about. So, I guess for you as a reader and as a writer, like what are your earliest memories of being a reader that you could think of?
Yeah, I read really early with my mom. I have distinct memories of going to the library with her to pick out books. And in the kids section, they had like little sticker designations on the spines of books to indicate like what age group was most appropriate for the books. So mine was like pink oval or something like that when I was like 3 years old or something. So my mom would say, look for the pink oval. And I would pick out books, and I remember her reading with me and teaching me to use my finger to follow the words across the page as she was reading. And I know that she taught me how to read and to write my name before I went to kindergarten, and I have memories of sitting in her lap, holding a pen in my hand as she helped me trace the letters A, N, N, E, and so on. So yeah, I have a lot of early memories of reading with my mom, not so much independently until I was older.
Okay. No, I think that's kind of the same. When I was growing up, my mom used to take me to our local library. So they would do like summer contests for reading, but they also would do like not ovals, they would do stars on books. So if I had like 3 stars and I knew I could read it, but if it was something with less stars, it's probably something that we couldn't read. So I love that. And also, kind of similar too, my mom used to make me do book reviews based on the books that I read. So,
Wow.
like, well, they weren't like very deep
Yeah,
ones. It would be
yeah.
like,
The
oh, I love
summaries.
that girl. So I think like that was something that made me start liking reading more, but then also liking to write about what I read too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that strategy from your mom.
Well, yeah, I think it helps you be like comprehend a lot of things too as you're reading.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And be thinking about it, not just
Hmm.
reading it and then forgetting about it, but
Hmm.
then
No,
having to go back and remember what you read.
yeah. And I guess now also like how do you read, especially like being an author? I feel like maybe your reading experience is maybe a little bit different because you're also writing books too. So like
Hmm.
how does your experience differ now?
Well, it fluctuates for sure. So there were years where I was reading 200 books a year. And so I read a lot of books. And pretty much anything that anybody recommended to me, I would read, and then I would read that author's like entire bibliography. I just would be like, well, okay, well, I like this one. I'll read everything by this author now. And that was when I had like more free time. I was working as a nanny for a baby, and babies like there's some work, but they sleep a lot. So it's like, okay, well, I have 3 hours to kill. And so I did a lot of reading during that time. Now that I have my own baby, I have less time for reading, but one of the things that I wanted to make sure to do is to role model reading for him so that he sees not just that mom and dad read with him his children's books, but that mom and dad like to read on their own
Hmm.
and that it's a fun activity, it's a normal activity to be doing. And so lately in the mornings, I've been more intentional with picking up a book rather than my phone. So
Hmm.
when we're eating breakfast or I'm drinking coffee and he's kind of eating, kind of playing, that
Yes.
he sees me reading a book. I also because I don't have a lot of downtime to read for pleasure, I read a lot as an editor as well. So once those books get published, I go back in my reading list and I mark that I read those books so that I,
Hmm.
I get credit I get credit for having read the books as an editor. But because I have so little downtime, I have to find pockets where I can spend and it's like, okay, well, it's not enough time to, let's say, like run downstairs and do the dishes or something like that, but it's enough time for me to sit and read 5 pages of something. And so one of those times is when my kid is in his bath.
Hmm.
We just finished bath time, but he still wants to play in the tub. He can play in the tub as long as he wants because that's mommy's reading time. And I sit on the toilet next to the bathtub with my book, and he gets to see me engrossed in a novel or engrossed in a craft book or a graphic novel or something. And sometimes when he's like all done, I'm like, "Oh, are you sure? Like, are you sure you're done playing?"
No, I think that's cool because I was gonna ask, like, do you find that you read in other formats? But I think with role modeling reading, like you said, I think being able to show that you're reading and getting immersed into a book, I think it is something that's cool for him to see. Hopefully, he'll be a reader as he gets older.
Yeah, he definitely loves books, but he definitely loves screen time too. And I wouldn't say that he's reliant on a screen by any means, but he's definitely not reliant on books either. But
Yeah.
he does love books and he'll bring books to us to read and we read the same books often. He has favorite books that he loves to read that he even knows the words of and he just turned 2. So I'll be reading and I'll leave off the last word and then let him fill in the word because some of the books we've read hundreds of times and he definitely knows them now. So I hope that it sticks with him and that I can continue being a good role model and maybe he'll read my books one of these days.
No, that would be so cute. No, and I
Someday.
think hopefully it will because I feel like when I was growing up, my mom would read like the Bernstein Bears to me a lot. But once I found that I could like read them by myself or like talk to my dad about books that I was reading, it gave me a confidence in myself. Like I actually know these words now that I can say them. So like I think that that's cool that you do that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Happy Iceland.
Okay.
So for one, if you could give like a quick spill about the book, and then we'll start there because I feel like I have a few questions.
Sure, yes. So Happy Iceland is a travel memoir, 242 pages. So it's not too long. All right. Actually, 82. Oops. But there are a lot of maps. I have maps in there that show like the different places that I went. But the premise of the book is that I'm about to turn 30. I'm in a dead-end relationship and I'm unemployed and I'm watching the people around me having these milestones. Either they're nailing incredible jobs, having promotions, they're finding the loves of their life, and I'm just like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I so miserable? Jumping from one relationship to the next, one job to the next, not really feeling settled. And I had this longer dream, not, lifelong dream, but a longer dream of traveling to Iceland. And so I kind of just spur of the moment impulsively made the decision that I would go for my 30th birthday. And I'm not really a planner. And so I like to do things kind of impromptu and improvising what I do. I don't like to commit. I like to decide in the moment, or I used to. I'm much more of a planner now, but I used to be like that. And so I came up with this cockamamie idea, and I tell people that a ghost told it to me because I had really no idea how my brain came up with this, but that I would ask a random Icelandic stranger about their happiest memories in Iceland, and then I would go try to find that place. And then whenever I got there, I would ask a new person about their happiest memories and try to go find that place. And I was on a very tight budget since I was unemployed. I used the savings that I had, which was like $1,000 and change on the airline ticket. And I am an outdoorsy person. I've done long backpacking trips where I sleep under a tarp and use a Coke can as a stove. So I know how to live pretty Spartanly. And so that's what I did. I hitchhiked everywhere. I backpacked everywhere. I didn't rent a car or stay in hotels, and I met a lot of cool, interesting people as a result, and then wrote a book about it. It took 10 years to write a book because at the time I didn't know how to write. I didn't have a background in writing. I didn't go to school for writing or literature at all. I have a degree in ecology. And so I had to really start from scratch, reading every single book, watching every YouTube video on writing, and I started volunteering for a writing organization. Anyway, I'm getting off track. You were asking about Happy Iceland, and I gave it to you. There you go.
Well, no, I feel like that's actually really interesting because you said you didn't know how to write before you started writing. So I guess, and I wrote about this on Substack today because I was very curious how people, when you write a memoir, like what is the process like for that? So as someone who's coming in and you're learning how to write in the process and you are writing about your experiences, like how did you write it? Like, well, I think that's what you just said, but like, did you outline it and then say like, oh, I'm going to do this? Or like, how did you put it all together?
It was a very slow process, Erin. It was very, very from the ground up. So, the first I took a lot of notes. The very first thing I did was I just took all the notes and I wrote them out in a Google Doc or whatever.
Hmm.
But, nicely. I wrote it out nicely. And I thought, oh, this is writing. Like, this is so good. This is writing. And I had a friend of mine read it with a red pen and make, suggested edits, proofreading, that kind of thing. And then I sent it out to agents, being like,
Hmm.
who wouldn't want to read this book? This is so interesting and cool. But of course, nobody did. And so I got nothing but no's. I sent it out to over 100 agents, all no's. And then I started volunteering with the literary organization, and so that I could take their classes for free and go to their writers conference for free. And one person who took a look at my, first 10 pages or whatever suggested that I get a writing coach to learn how to write. And it just so happened, very coincidentally, this author that I knew of, I didn't know her or personally or anything, I knew of her, was like advertising that she was trying to build up her portfolio of writing coaching clients. So she was offering like full manuscript evaluations for $250,
Oh,
which is
wow.
like dirt cheap.
Hmm.
And I was working as a nanny at the time, so I didn't have a lot of money. And even $250 was a lot of money, but I knew that I could afford that and not thousands of dollars, which it normally costs. And so she did. She went through my whole manuscript, but I didn't know enough about writing to understand her feedback. So she would highlight sections and say things like, show, don't tell. Well, I have no idea how to show. How am I not showing it? Like, isn't this showing? Like, what more do you want? And so I had to learn what that meant. Or she would highlight a section and be like, I would like to see more of you in here. Well, I don't know what that means. When you're a beginner writer, I need examples. Can you give me an
Yeah.
example of what that meant? And so I was so overwhelmed by her feedback that I ended up not touching the book for like over 6 months.
Oh, wow.
I was just like so overwhelmed. But every time I learned something new, I would then go back to the novel, apply that new lesson. So then I learned about adverbs and like how to avoid adverbs in your manuscript. I did a control F of ly and there was 888 adverbs. So that was a whole, hullabaloo of going in and okay, finding every adverb and turning it into showing instead of telling. Then I learned, instead of using terminology like I saw, I heard, that it's just you didn't hear the birds singing. The birds were singing as they were,
Hmm.
doing whatever, using stronger language like that. So then I went through my whole manuscript again. Okay. Then I was like learning about poetry, and I started writing poetry more seriously around 2020. And so then, as I was learning things about poetry and descriptive writing and imagery and all of this stuff, then I was now incorporating those lessons into Happy Iceland. And in the meantime, every time I, made some new improvement to the manuscript, I was like, oh, well, now this is wonderful. Okay, send it out to agent. And then would be disappointed when it would come back as a no again. There's just so much to learn. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so now finally I feel like it is the manuscript's in a place now that I feel really proud of it, and but it took 10 years. It was not an overnight process by any means. Even with all the books I read and the YouTube videos and the classes, there's just so much and you can't really skip over it and then suddenly be a good writer. You have to just learn all of it slowly as you learn it and then apply it to your writing.
No, I think that's actually really cool because I feel like sometimes when you are like looking at the things that people do, it seems like it could be something. like writing a book doesn't seem easy, but like as you are a reader and you look at people who write these books, it's kind of like, oh, I wonder what the process was like. And I think also sometimes you see people who write books so quickly, but also could be because they've got like a rhythm they kind of learned and went through the growing pains that you went through for 10 years.
Hmm.
And it's just really cool to see because I think also like you're very determined is what I took from that, because also you could have just said like, oh, this is not getting the feedback that I want, let me just stop. I appreciate that you kept fine tuning it and updating it and making those tweaks. And I think also too like you have to love your book because you've also read it so many times as you've been making those updates too, which is really nice.
And it's true. I believe in it. I
Mm-hmm.
believe in this story, and one of the things that helped me keep going was that this was after I got the editorial feedback from the writing coach that overwhelmed me. I was at the writers conference for free because I was working and volunteering for the organization, and I was in a nonfiction workshop. We all were, going around in a circle talking about our projects. And at the end of the workshop, a stranger came up to me and she said, I was just in Iceland, and you have no idea how many people asked me if I knew the American woman who ran around finding people's
Oh,
happy
I love.
places. And I would tell them there's 300 million people in the United States. No, I don't know this woman. And now, 2 weeks later, I'm in the same room as you. And I just broke down crying, absolute like ugly cry in front of this like stranger, complete stranger. But I knew that I had to keep going. I couldn't give up on it, that they were still talking about me. And I became kind of like a local legend while I was there. Like I would meet people and they knew about me from their friends who had picked me up hitchhiking. So they had
Wow.
already heard about me and then they picked me up. I was there for 5 weeks and there's only 300,000 people who live in Iceland. So
Wow.
word kind of got around. And then
Mhm.
I was interviewed by a journalist a couple years later. It was the number two read story in the country at the time when it came out. And then that was a year after that. I think it was in 2019 that that stranger came up to me. And so it was still 3 years after I did that, and they're still talking about it. So I felt like I had to keep going. I knew, and I couldn't let it go because it just meant so much to me that I couldn't let it go. But now I can. It's going out into the world.
Well,
And
no,
I
that's very
really
like
think helps me.
serendipitous.
Sorry, what?
I said that's very serendipitous that you met someone there and they knew that story. And I think too, like when people go places, they're always like bringing up stories of like things that happen in the country or like where you are. It's never anything that's positive around like happiness. So they probably also, like that probably touched them.
Yeah, it stuck out as different.
Hmm. So I guess I know you said a ghost told you this to do, but what made you think of that angle? Like the happiness angle, especially like I think right now with the everything going on in the world, even like the time that the book is coming out, I feel like it's just a really good time, especially in the world. Like what made you one think about that, and then also what are some of the things that you learned from happiness that you've applied to your life going forward and that have stuck with you, I guess, for those
Yeah,
10
great
years?
questions. So the first thing I mean, I had this dream of going to Iceland and seeing the like just such different geology and landscape than I had ever seen before. But I also knew that Iceland always scored really high in the World Happiness Index. Not always number one, but it was always like number three or number two. So I knew that
Which is high.
they had like, they have some ideas that I don't have. And especially if they're so far north, there's so much cold, so much darkness there, and yet they're still one of the happiest countries on the planet. I felt, and I was so sad. I was like in a really deep depression at the time, just feeling really lost, feeling unlovable and like a flounderer. And I was watching also like I have an older sister and she just has it together. She's a very organized person and she was working at George Washington University, and she always had like a stable living environment and living situation and job, and I just was never that person. And so I was doing like a lot of comparisons of like, well, what am I not getting right? Like, what do I keep doing wrong that I'm not finding love, I'm not finding a career, like what is going on? And so I just had this idea that I would ask the people who would know, like, well, you're happy.
Hmm.
You score high on the happiness index. What makes you happy? And maybe I would learn something from that. And what I found was that most of the stories were like really basic, like not extraordinary things. Nobody, not a single person said, oh, my happiest memory was when I gave birth to my child, or even, oh, when I went on vacation to this place or whatever, whatever. And no, I met one couple who picked me up and I asked them about their happiest memories, an older couple, like maybe in their 70s. And the wife was like, oh, well, we were just really happy eating at this cafe. What was it called, dear? And he's like, oh, I don't really remember the name, but yes, it was very good food. And yes, I felt so happy there. Just stories like that. I met another guy who said he felt like he thought he was happiest when he was playing sports in high school with his friends.
Oh, I love.
Yeah. And I even met by happenstance like two 12-year-old girls. And so I asked them, and they talked about playing like a game akin to hide and seek when
Hmm.
they both lived in the same neighborhood.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I went to go find their old like childhood neighborhood. So it was always like these memories that weren't extraordinary. They were just like everyday occurrences, but that they made note of it. And not all of
Hmm.
them. Like one woman was like, I was watching this volcano erupt, but then she was there with her friends. So she wasn't alone. She was like sharing in community with people
Hmm.
that she loved, like this extraordinary event. It wasn't just the event, it was that she was there with her friends. And so one of the things that I took away from that, and something that I practice now with my husband, we've been doing this for years, is that at the end of the day, before we go to sleep, we ask each other, what delighted you today?
I love.
And not what you're grateful for, because I feel like grateful is different. Like you
Hmm.
can be grateful for the roof over your head and that you had 3 meals today and that your car is working and stuff like that. But I think moments of delight is a little bit different. That you're
Hmm.
finding moments of joy despite everything that is possible to not give you joy.
Hmm.
And so oftentimes it has to do with our son because he's only 2 and he says the cutest things and they're very delightful. Or when I am walking him in the stroller, he waves at every car and some of the cars wave back at him. It's so
I
cute.
love.
And, small things like, oh, it delighted me that there were no bills in the mailbox today. Or it delighted me that when I went to the grocery store, I didn't have to wait in line, blah, 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 blah. So we go through our list of things that delighted us that day. And I do feel like, especially compared to 10 years ago, that I am a happier person as a result. And I haven't always been with my husband. I've had other dead or dead end relationships, and I'm still figuring out the career thing. I haven't quite figured that bit out, but I'm happy anyway because I'm focusing on the joys in my life more than on what I'm lacking.
No, I love that. There's so much that you said that I'm like processing in my head that I really love because I think like what delighted you today, and I think even like the stories that you said from people, it's how people always say like money doesn't buy happiness. Like, I think that shows that because you like often it's like the people who you're with, the community that you cultivate, little things that you see. Because like if I asked myself what delighted me today, I would probably say like because we have like all these really pretty flowers. So I've been like getting out of the car, like going on walks and taking pictures of them.
Yeah,
And that like fills me up every day when I do that.
yeah,
But it's so nice to like that. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts from that just right now.
yeah. That was actually one of my delights maybe a couple days ago that on a street parallel to ours, the little dinky like sapling trees outside of this apartment building are suddenly all are in flower.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I had seen them and they look beautiful. And so that was one of my delights too, that these like barren trees just suddenly now have flowers
Hmm.
seemingly overnight. And yeah, it's just like small things like that.
No, and I think like the perspective change too, like how you said that there could be things that you're lacking, but you focus on what you have and the positive. Like, I think if more people did that, that would maybe we would be a happier country.
Yeah, and of course it's not a cure-all. If, you
Yeah.
know, people with clinical depression thinking about what delighted them, that's not gonna,
Yeah, of course.
push the needle. But I feel like just in general, as a generalization, that
Hmm.
I think it does help people. And for me, it helps me more than like the gratitude journal, because for
Hmm.
me, the gratitude journal kind of felt heavier, that if I'm not grateful or if I can't find anything to be grateful for today, then I'm an ungrateful person, or that says
Yeah.
something like bad about me, about myself. But with delight, well, if nothing delighted you today, because maybe you had the shittiest day of your life, maybe you lost a loved one or you lost your job and you can't really focus on what delighted you today, I feel like there's no judgment there.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're an ungrateful person or that there's something deficient about you or something, that it's just like maybe lower stakes.
Hmm. Well, no, and I feel like sharing it with your husband is also like sharing your pockets of joy with someone else too and having it back, which could also fill your cup with more joy too.
Yeah. And also, it delights me more when something I did delighted him.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a good pat on the back.
Sometimes he'll say, "Oh, when I was in the office, I heard you singing to our child, and that delighted me." And then just knowing that that delighted him, delighted me. It's a
Hmm.
domino effect.
No, I love. And then I think too, like one thing I thought when I was reading the book and also just seeing how you approach people and also how you went on the trip by yourself too. I felt like that was like a lot of confidence, especially like it's a lot of confidence and also like trust in yourself and also trusting like your intuition with people and things like that too. So I guess for some of the people that you ended up meeting and them telling you their stories of happiness and meeting the next people, like how did you approach people and also how did you like lean into your trust of yourself, I guess, to take on these experiences?
Well, first, the trust in myself that came with time as well.
Mhm.
So it wasn't that, I've never traveled before and now suddenly I'm going to Iceland and I'm backpacking and hitchhiking. It
Yeah.
didn't happen all at once. I did a planned 3-month through hike in Florida on the National Florida Scenic Trail with a friend of mine, so I didn't go alone. And before that, I had done some practice hikes on the Finger Lakes Trail in New York, where I'm from, and like some smaller things with like I said, I went to school with ecology, so with my ecology cohort, that we did some like outdoor lab things, and that involved camping outside. And so I learned a lot of skills, outdoorsy
Mhm.
skills, camping skills, and I learned how to hitchhike. And so I started out with a friend and then felt confident enough that I could go on my own. So that confidence definitely took time. It wasn't just an overnight thing, but I found every time that I got into a sticky situation that I was able to get myself out of it. And
Mhm.
so when that happens, then you learn to trust yourself, that not only can you prevent precarious situations from happening, but that if they do happen, you can get yourself out of them. And then for approaching people, I think that I leaned into faking that I was a better writer than I was. So at that time, I did publish a children's book during my master's program, Mommy, Why Am I a Bird? So I
That's
did
so
my
cute.
master's in ecology, but I studied ecological education in early childhood. And through that project, I published this children's book through my university press. So technically, I was a published author, technically.
Yeah.
I'm from upstate New York, outside of Syracuse, and that's where I'm from. So I say I'm from New York, but when you say you're from New York anywhere outside of New York State, they just assume New York City. So
Yes.
when I say like, "Oh, hi, I'm a writer from New York and I'm working on this writing project," everybody's like, "New York City, she must
Yes.
be amazing. Like she's a New York writer." And of course that wasn't the truth. And nobody said like, "Oh, you live in New York City and did you write for the New York Times?" Nobody asked me those questions, and I would have told the truth. I wouldn't have ever lied. But I think that that impression gave me some credibility, And when people did ask me, like, oh, what did you publish? Oh, a children's book. I was honest about my publication history, which was very small. And then when people would ask, like, oh, like, how long until the book comes out, do you think? And I would say, like, oh, give me 2 years. And I thought that that was being really generous with the amount of time that it would take to write a book and get it published. Now, 10 years later, it's coming out. So I think that that gave me a little bit of credibility, but then still some people were like a little trepidatious about me coming up to them and asking them a question. Most of them were happy to divulge information, but I feel like a couple people were like a little bit more guarded. There was one gentleman who was walking with his young son, and I asked him, and he told me about watching his son dive into the pool at the public pool for the first time that day, and how that was like a moment of happiness that I was, and I don't say, can you tell me about today? I say,
Hmm.
like, can you tell me about a time you felt really happy in Iceland? And he's like, well, I felt really happy watching my son dive into the pool for the first time today. And so I went to
But
go find the public pool. So I was like, oh, can you tell me like where that public pool is? And he was like, oh, like his face froze up and he kind of like leaned back. And I was like, I promise I'm not going to stalk you and your son. And then he told me the name of it, but only after I gave him like reassurances that I wasn't going to try to follow him or like show up unexpectedly. I did go to the swimming pool, and while I was there, I was like, "Oh God, I hope he doesn't show up and see me here." And he didn't, thank goodness. So, I mean, some people were more guarded than others for sure, but I feel like for the most part, people were just very open, generous with their time, generous with their warmth, generous with their stories. And maybe it also was because it was a really interesting thing. This was also pre-COVID. This was
yeah,
also pre-Trump being president. It was like in the midst of the election season. So it was before he even won the election. And I think the States just was looked at differently
differently.
than it is, especially now. So it was just a really different time that people, I think, were more open and
Hmm.
interested than maybe they would even be today. I feel like now, especially post COVID, people are much more wary about inviting a stranger into their space or into their car. So maybe not, but I just feel like the whole environment of the world is different.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you say that though, because how I said earlier, I think the timing of when this book is coming out, especially, and I guess we're like in a T world. I was trying to say like before or after Trump, like, okay, but we're in that world now. Like, I think people need like pockets of joy, and I think your book can provide that for them. But I think also, like you said, if you tried to do the book now as like you were writing the story and then you went there, I do wonder what the like how that would have changed the interactions that you did have with people.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I wonder that all the time, honestly. And just like you said, I do hope that for the book that during times particularly when life is just really harder than normal and getting harder, I hope that this book does serve as just like a little armchair travel story that
Hmm.
brings some delight to people. And it doesn't need to be more than that. It doesn't need to be some, life-changing, like, before I read Happy Iceland, I was this kind of person. Now after I read it, now I'm this type of person. It doesn't have to be that big, just that they read it and say, like, that was delightful.
No,
That's good enough for me.
no, I think they will because I feel like after I read it, I felt like, for one, I felt like it was interesting because I've always wanted to go to Iceland and I've never been. So, like, I thought it was interesting from that perspective. I think also, as someone who reads a lot of memoirs, just like as something that I like, I've never really tapped into like travel ones. I think maybe like Eat, Pray, Love is probably like the most synonymous one I could think of.
Right.
But I liked your angle because also I am in my 30s, so it also kind of felt like relevant to my life and things that I've experienced too. So like I enjoyed that part. And I think too, like even just I read this book at like I think I started it at I went to a silent book club, like you know those things that are popping up all over.
Yes.
And people were like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm reading Happy Iceland." And people were like, "Well, tell me about it." So like, I think I talked to like four or five different people who were really interested, even like in the cover, because I think just seeing like the color is
Hmm.
something that's also just like captivating because it's such a bright color too. Like For you, what was that process of selecting what you wanted the book to look like on the outside too? Because I think that also pulls so well into the story too.
Yeah, that's like another ghost story. I was with my now ex-boyfriend and he was watching, I don't know, some Netflix thing and I was reading, I don't know, some poetry collection probably. I'm not super into TV and most shows don't keep my attention.
Oh, that's good.
And literally it just popped into my brain and I was like, yellow, hollow letters with Iceland behind it, like a landscape of Iceland behind it. And I didn't know how like that was going to actually look. Like, is that actually going to look good or be interesting? And then the cover designer, her name is Emily Ann Evans, and she's a lovely human being. And I was like, hey, so I have this idea. What do you think? Is that hard to do? Like, and she was like, no, that's not hard at all. And then she, had a variety of ways of how it was looked on the cover of how the letters were arranged and da 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 da. And then it was just like, well, the first one's perfect. And that's what ended up sticking. So it actually was a really, really fast process, and I was really pleased with how it turned out. Yeah, not all book covers, I know a lot of authors who are like, well, the book cover wasn't my first choice, but I was grateful that I had a book cover designer who really understood the assignment and followed through in a way that I think it looked I also think it looks great. It's very different than my other book covers, and I think it's just also different from other book covers in
Yeah.
general. So I do hope that it stands out on a shelf or captures people's attention.
No, it definitely will because I think it's so bright that you're kind of like, I wonder what this is about. And then when you actually read it, because I think even like I read obviously like the ebook, but even like some of the things that were underneath the chapter titles where it was just like the little like details. I think it just like I think reading it, it was just such a nice experience because I thought the pages and everything also looked really nice and detailed.
Thank you.
So I guess well, I feel like I could ask you a lot more questions, but maybe we'll end with a rapid fire round. So,
Okay.
okay, I'm going to think of these on the fly. So, if you could think of one lesson in happiness that you learned on your trip that you have kept with you today, aside from just delights, but like something that you do when you are not necessarily being intentional with finding happiness, but being mindful of it, like what would that one thing be? I feel like I asked like five questions in one question
Yeah,
just
but I
then, but
understand you.
okay.
And I think to quote Into the Wild, I think it's happiness is with other people. Just that the importance of community. Like I told you, that gentleman that I met said that he was happiest playing sports with his friends in high school. I think just feeling connected to other people is a big, big component of delight and happiness. And if that's not present in someone's life, it's sometimes hard to find. But I think if you can find a place that you volunteer or some kind of support group or a silent book club, just being in community with others, even if it's virtual, I think can help with happiness in general.
No, I think that's definitely true, especially like looking at like the loneliness numbers from especially coming out of the pandemic and then even like as a reader seeing some of the books that have come out about like friendship and togetherness as a response to that. Like I think that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Let's see another thing. So, since I talk a lot about music and books, if you had to say what is one song or one album that instantly makes you feel happy?
Hmm. Well, one song that I've been playing on repeat is by Ray, Raye.
Hmm.
The song Suzanne. It's not on her album, but if you
Okay.
put it into YouTube or whatever, Ray Suzanne, I've just been listening to it all the time. Like if I need like a quick pick me up, I like that's what I put on, and it's probably been, I don't know, last 6 months or something, or
That's
maybe
a
not
long
that long,
time.
but just recently. That's like
Okay.
what gets me going, and like I'm folding laundry and I'm just like, this is tedious or whatever. Then I throw on that song that I'm jamming as I'm folding laundry. Yeah.
No, I love. And then let's see. If you wanted to give people like a one bullet point synopsis into why they should read Happy Iceland, what would you say?
Why they should read it to support, help me support my family. Yeah, help me pay my bills and my rent. That'd be great. But I mean, that is serious. But I think if you're looking for an interesting book, I feel like it could be inspiring to people. Not necessarily that they're gonna like go off and go hitchhiking somewhere and talk to strangers, but that it would just inspire a reflection about their own ways of cultivating joy in their own life. And no, I don't think that that's a bad exercise for most people to do. So I would say that.
No, I love. And like I think when you just say that, I feel like I should get this for my dad because my dad's very like relationship based and that's where he finds his joy. So I think he would read this and feel the same joy that he feels when he's interacting with people because that's one of his favorite things to do.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because so far with my advanced readers, I feel like I have two main demographics, and that's women between the ages of 30 and 40, and then men
Of
between
course.
the ages of like 50 and 70.
Oh no, I think that's true because I'm the 30 to 40 range and then my dad is he just turned 65, but like we literally just had a conversation this morning about him and how he remembers these random details about people from different interactions. So like I feel like he would definitely be the demo.
Cool, cool. Yeah. Send it his way.
Okay, perfect. And then lastly, if people for one want to buy the book, when does it come out? And then if people also want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Sure, it's on pre-order right now, and you can find it on bookshop.org. That's like the most ethical way to buy online these days.
Yes.
Or maybe not the most, but one of the most. It is on Amazon as well, evil Amazon, but it's there. And you can find it on my website, annemariewellswriter.com. And then it comes out June 27th. So if you pre-order it, I think it'll get to your house on like June 29th or something. And it's also available on Book Sirens. So if people are on Book Sirens as advanced readers, then they can find it on there and they can get a digital copy in exchange for a review. So if they want to do that, that's also an option. And they can also connect with me on my website or on Instagram. I'm on like most social media places at Anne Marie Wells Writer.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Anne Marie.
Thank you,
So I'll
Erin.
put thank you, and I'll put the links to everything below just so everyone can navigate. But thank you so much again for talking to me, and please, everyone, please read Happy Iceland as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much.